Good morning, welcome to the Brock Automotive channel again. Working back on the wrecker again today. This is going to be part 2 of the video we did on the rough idle and high RPM flutter. If you haven't watched that video yet, there's a part 1 where we go through the problem, kind of diagnose what's going on. What it ended up being is the Reman pump, injection pump that we got from, there it is, that we got from Pensacola Diesel. Apparently there's something wrong inside the pump. I did a bunch of testing myself, called their customer support, explained what the issue, what it was doing, what I'd done to check it. We agreed that there's likely something inside the pump that ain't quite right. So they shipped me a warranty replacement pump free of charge. No issues, no argument or anything. They shipped it right out. So it arrived yesterday afternoon. We're gonna get it put on here. Take the truck for another test drive and see what happens. Okay, we're getting this thing busted apart to put the warranty pump on it. Like I said earlier, we already put a Reman on it here 4 or 5 days ago. Ran into some drivability issues. Pensacola Diesel offered to send us a warranty replacement out. So we just received that yesterday, I believe, yesterday afternoon. We're grabbing this one off. We're going to put a new one on. We're going to put a new fuel filter manager. There went the impact onto the floor, but we're going to put a new fuel filter manager on it too. It sits back here in the back. It's where your fuel filter lives, and it also has a fuel heater and a water and fuel light. Looks like a lot of work to get down to this point. It's not too bad. You have to take the upper intake off, which sits up here and connects to the turbo. I believe there's 6 bolts that hold that on, plus your clamp over here. Then your lower intake manifold, that's not too bad either. The fuel filter manager, 2 bolts hold that to the lower intake, and then you have 3 fuel lines on it. In from the tank, out of the fuel filter up to the injection pump, and a drain line. So not that big of a deal. You also have 3 bolts in here that hold the drive gear to the front of the pump. You go through this hole to get it. You have to take 1 bolt out, turn the engine over till the next bolt is in this hole. Take that bolt out. I turn it with the alternator. See where it's at here. I put a big ratchet and a socket on this alternator. Then you can use that to bar the engine over. You don't have to keep getting underneath the truck and back out again. So as far as the rest of the stuff you have to take off to get the pump out of here, you've got a pretty good wiring harness here that clips onto the pump in several places. 1, 2, 3, coolant temperature sensor. This down here, this wire is the crankshaft position sensor. That's got to come off. I usually take the wires off the AC and lay that little harness over to the side, get it out of the way. You also have to take off these fuel nuts, or nuts that hold the lines on. These lines all have to go in a particular place on the back of the pump, kind of just like spark plug wires would be on a distributor cap. It's pretty easy to do. The lines are steel, they're bent a certain way, they line up with a certain port. You really have to kind of work at it to get them on the wrong place. All right, we got the pump out. Kind of see what I was talking about the injector lines right there and how they all kind of point at a certain spot. They're pretty stiff as far as, like I said, you really have to go at them to get them bent to the wrong spot. All right, so here is our old, I guess you would say, injection pump, the first Reman we got that we're taking out for warranty purposes. Here's the warranty replacement that's going back in. Nice and clean, everything's capped off well. Looks to be in like new condition. We're also putting in a new fuel filter manager. This guy is your fuel filter that sits in the back of the engine. Really, you can only see it from about here up when it's in the truck. But your fuel filter is inside here, your fuel heater is inside here, and then a water and fuel sensor is also in this manager, as they call it. 3 hose connections on it. This one comes from the fuel tank, from the lift pump, into the filter. This little guy is a drain where you can drain the water and junk that gets collected in the bottom of the filter. You can open a drain valve on the truck. It will drain through this hose out on the ground so you can keep the water and stuff out of your fuel. Then this fitting goes out to the injection pump, right here on the injection pump where the fuel comes into the pump. I've got this one from Leroy Diesel. Here's his information. He's a big 6'5" guy. He may have other stuff too. I'm not sure for other types of diesels, but I believe according to his card here, he specializes in 6'5" stuff only. I got this from him. It comes with what's called the Feed the Beast mod. All right, we can see here on the factory filter manager, this is the fitting that goes out to the injection pump. You can see how big around it is. This new fitting, if you compare them, the outlet fitting there where the yellow is, you can see how much bigger it is on the new fuel filter manager with the mod. This is going to allow a whole lot more fuel to come through this fitting than this little tiny fitting that GM put on it from the factory. It also comes with a matching fitting that you put on the injection pump up here. You replace the tiny little factory inlet fitting, which again up here is small, and you now run a 3/8 hose on it. You don't have to buy a new filter manager to get this mod. You can buy the fittings separately and modify your original or your factory fuel filter manager that you have on your truck now. These little fittings are just pressed into the housing. I've done this on a Suburban I had years ago. You just pull this fitting out with a pair of pliers. You drill this hole out and tap it to accept the fitting. Run your fitting in here, and then just put your new fittings on it that you bought. Leroy sells them. There's a couple other 6'5" guys that sell them on the internet. I opted to go and get the new assembly. Couple reasons. When I got to looking at the one I had on my truck, you can see this fuel heater on the bottom of it is all kind of cross-threaded. Looks like it was probably sucking air around there. I don't know how well you can tell on camera, but it's definitely cross-threaded on there. And also, the fuel heater wires have been cut off. These wires. Just to buy this fuel heater separately and put it in my old housing, this part's over $100. Just this part alone, the heater. So I'm going to have $100 in this, just getting a new heater. Then I'm also going to have the price of the fittings to modify my old one. So to me, it was just a lot easier. Buy a brand new filter housing, nice and pretty. Already come with the mod. Leroy puts that on there for you. It's got a new fuel heater. Shouldn't have any problems at all out of this. So I'm going to get started on putting in the new fuel filter manager and the new pump, get this stuff back together, and hopefully we can get this thing running tonight. Okay, we've got everything swapped over onto the new pump. Got our aftermarket fuel fittings installed here. I just wanted to show you one last time here before we put it together. This is the factory fitting for the fuel inlet into the pump. And if you compare it to the new fitting we've got on there, the new fittings is so much bigger. You're going to get so much more fuel through there for power purposes and to keep the pump cool, more importantly. The cooler you can keep the pump, the longer it's going to last. This is the elbow that comes with the Feed the Beast kit. Really nice quality. All right, we're doing good putting it back together. We've got our latest and greatest pump in there. We've got our filter manager back in there. That's kind of where you set that guy, just kind of there in the middle, out of the way. It bolts to the back of the lower intake manifold once it's in, which is what we're ready to put in next. Alrighty, folks, I think we're there. We got everything put back together. We've got no bolts left over. We got no parts left over. Always a good thing. All right, it's that time. I primed the fuel system with the electric fuel pump. Bled the fuel filter, all the air out of it, so hopefully we won't crank too long here before we start. Of course, it's still going to have some air in it. Diesels can't have any air in the fuel system, so it may run a little bit rough when it first starts, but it should smooth out here fairly quickly. Wait for the glow plugs to go out. Not really that concerned yet. Like I said, it's probably got some air in it that inside the pump especially that's not going to get bled out until you crank it a little bit. Come on, baby, anytime now. Okay, well, we might be something to worry about here. Let's see. bleed the fuel system some more. I've got the lift pump turned on right now to bleed some more air out of it. Kind of going over a little checklist in my mind right now of the fuel solenoid there on top of the pump. That's what turns the engine off. When you turn the key off, the fuel solenoid snaps shut, blocks off the fuel in the pump, and that's what shuts your engine down. I know that's plugged in. I had to plug it and unplug it a couple times, kind of rerouting the wire around some coolant hoses over there near the turbo. So I know that's plugged in. Let's try her again here and see what happens. I want to hear this thing run. It's after 9 o'clock on a Friday night. Stayed down here just to get this thing together and hear it run. Okay, folks, I'm starting to get a little bit worried here. All right, so I've double checked a few things. The connections, this guy here, this tall fella, is the fuel solenoid I was talking about. Made sure that's plugged in. It is over here on the other side of this upper intake. Everything looks like it's supposed to be out here. Double checked a few things. Let's go back inside and try again. Maybe it's just, you know, even though I bled the fuel filter back there, the line between it and the pump are still going to be have air in them. Plus I had, you know, all the injector lines unplugged at the back of the pump. They're going to have air in them. So it may just take a second of cranking to get it out of there. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. Let's see what happens here. Let the glow plug cycle again. There we go. There we go. All right, so we're getting all the air out of it finally. Like I said, it'll run rough for just a minute while it gets the rest of that air out of the system. Right there, it's pretty well smoothed out into a normal idle. Hear a couple little hiccups in it. Let's go out here and look and see, make sure we ain't got any fuel leaks. Alright folks, had the truck running now for, I don't know, 5-6 minutes, something like that. Running pretty good really. It's smooth now. Every once in a while it has a little bit of a hiccup, but I think that's probably just timing. You know, once we time it and set the TDC offset, those kind of things, I think it'll be just fine. No check engine light. Got good oil pressure and everything. Temperature's just starting to move a little. Go out here under the hood where you can hear that. Sounds pretty good, I think. I was looking around under the hood there, and while it was warming up, I don't see any leaks of any kind. It's always a good thing. Kind of curious how it's going to restart. We'll shut it off here for a minute. Come out, look for leaks again, see if we see any wet spots. This connection up here on the pump where we did our fuel line mod, it's nice and dry. Go back here. Oh, back here in the back, look around the fuel filter. All right, so I just talked for about 5 minutes, said a lot of really smart things, gave you all some really good tips, and then looked and realized I was not recording. So we have to do all that again. I think we were back here by the fuel filter when it stopped recording. So what I was saying is you want to look at the lines, the 3 connections on the fuel filter, make sure nothing's leaking. Look down there in the valley underneath of the filter itself. Kind of see that you don't have any dampness down in there. Like I said earlier, you want to clean everything off with brake clean, blow it dry with compressed air. That way, you know if something's leaking or not. If I look down in there now and see any wetness, I know something's leaking. I don't have to try and guess of, well, maybe that was there before, maybe that's from where I bled the fuel filter. I'm not really sure. Maybe that's something I just didn't clean up. Now that we've had it shut off for a minute, let's crawl back in here and see how it restarts. In theory, if we've done our job right, it should start pretty easily, because we should have all the air out of it by now. Let the glow plugs do their thing. Okay, why did she shut off, I wonder? All right, now that's strange. All right, so there's something going on here that we just haven't figured out yet. Seemed like it was running pretty decent when it was running there a minute ago. I don't know. I'm gonna check some connections up here again, wiggle around on some wires, check a couple grounds, see if I can figure out what we got going on. All right, folks, we're back at it again today after a decent night's sleep. Some time to think it over and come up with a plan of attack here. I found a couple grounds this morning that I'm not really satisfied with. I'm going to clean those up, put a couple new terminals on them, make sure we're getting a good ground through those. I have no idea that that's even related to the problem we're having, but it is something that needs done regardless of whether it's related or not. Got the battery charger on it. She was starting to crank a little slow last night from cranking on it so much. So I'm going to get these grounds cleaned up. We may hook up the computer and see if we got any codes, or at least we can watch some data and see what we're missing as to why she won't start. Okay, so we're making some headway on what was happening here. I got to thinking about it. It was almost like it just wasn't getting fuel when it was cranking. You know, like the pump wasn't energized. So I come out here. This is your fuel solenoid on a Standardine DS4 pump like this. When you turn the key on, this gets energized. It pulls the plunger up and allows fuel to pass through the injection pump. When you turn the key off, this de-energizes. The spring pushes the plunger back down, blocks fuel. That's what shuts your engine off. I turned the key on, come out here, checked for power at this on the connector over here. On the connector with the key on, I should have power on one wire. You've got a power and a ground here. I did not have power at this connector, meaning the fuel solenoid was not being energized. That's why it wasn't starting. Got into the wiring diagram, found out what fuse controls the fuel solenoid. It is in this box right here. I've got a hood prop because for some reason on a decent gust of wind, my hood likes to slam closed. So, old style safety rod there. So in the fuse box here, the 20 amp right there in the middle of the screen that says fuel SOL, that is for your fuel solenoid. Pulled that fuse out. I just dropped it down here beside the battery, or I would show it to you. But I pulled that fuse out. It was not blown, but the legs on the fuse, the metal parts of the fuse, were very dirty. Started to clean it up, and then I thought, you know what, fuses are really cheap and whatever, so I'll just put a new one in it. As I put the fuse down and it made contact, I could hear the fuel solenoid clicking. So that has fixed our problem. I feel confident now that we've got power to the fuel solenoid. I'm pretty confident the truck's going to start just fine. Why that fuse worked for a little while last night, you know, the first couple times we started it, and then did not work later when we tried to start it, I can't tell you. But it is clicking now, so I'm confident that it's going to start. We'll see. Knock on wood. Go knock on my hood prop, I guess. Let the glow plug cycle. All right, good. Still have not set the timing or anything, of course, because we couldn't get it running again last night. I can let it warm up now that it's running again. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to test my luck here and shut it off and start it a few times just to kind of verify. All right, so I think we're in good shape with that now. I've got my Scan Tech hooked up here. I'm going to pull up my data list on it so I can see what everybody's doing. Most of this data is from the last time, the other pump, the first video. Today I'm looking at fuel rate. That's pretty good for a cold idle. I'm watching the temperature here because we need to get it warmed up to at least 180 before we can do the time set and the TDC offset. So right now everything's looking good. We'll let it warm up for a while and see what happens when we rev her up a little bit. Zoom you guys out so you can see here. So now we have no tach all of a sudden. I wonder what that's all about. I know the alternator on these is what controls the tach. Still nothing. Well, one more thing to fix. We'll just add that to the list, I guess. But I'll take the victory. It's running right now. Sounds pretty good. We're going to let her warm up and then we'll do the time set. All right, folks, we're about 16, almost 17 minutes in. Everything's running nice and smooth at the moment. No hiccups, no problems. The tach has come back to life. No check engine light. Still doing good on oil pressure and charging and everything else. I think, you know, I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic here, but I think we might be on to something this time. Still sounds good. I haven't seen any leaks or anything underneath of it. No puddles or nothing dripping out. I've looked up in the valley again, back at the fuel filter manager. Our modifications, everything looks to be doing just what it's supposed to. We're going to let it finish warming up to 180, and then we'll start the time set and the TDC offset. Okay, we've gotten up to the proper temperature, so now we can begin the time set and TDC offset learn. First thing we got to do is make sure we don't have any codes. So step one, you got to be at least 180 degrees. Step two, you can't have any active codes or it won't work. So we can read codes. See there, no current codes found, so we're good to go with that. We're going to go here to our TDC time set and learn. This is showing us desired injection timing. This is showing us actual injection timing. You want them to be very close to each other. What we got going on here is great. So we're going to go down here to TDC time set. Click on yes. We want right around 3.5, I believe. We're pretty close. We'll do the TDC learn and see what if we have to move our pump or not. Click on. So we're at positive 1.5, positive 1.76. That is a little more than we want. We'd like to be around negative 0.25 to negative 1.5, somewhere in that range. A lot of folks say negative 194 is the sweet spot of where you want it for the most horsepower. It gets awful rattly when it's cold. I've set other vehicles in the past to that, and it gets very rattly when it gets cold outside. Plus, I think the horsepower gain is literally only like 5 horsepower, 3 to 5 horsepower over, you know, setting it a little closer to zero, like negative 1.5, somewhere in that range. So we're going to shut it off. We're going to move the pump. I believe we have to tip it slightly toward the driver's side to get this number down lower. So we want negative, so we got to go down to zero and then a little past zero to the negative side of things. All right, so obviously you want to do this with the engine shut off. The way we move the pump, when I say we have to rotate the pump, we're physically going to move the pump, loosen up the nuts that hold it to the timing cover, and physically rotate it either toward the driver's side or toward the passenger side. There's 3 nuts that hold the pump to the timing cover. This one here, There's one way down in the valley there, and then over on this side, a lot harder to get to, is another nut. I don't know if you can even see it down in there for all the wiring loom and whatever else, but trust me, it's down in there. It's the same place this one is, it's just on the passenger side of the pump. Normally what I'll do when I'm putting a new pump in a 6.5, or if I've had to move the pump for some reason, had it off or whatever, when I put it back in, I'll only tighten the top bolt or the top nut. I'll snug the bottom two down kind of finger tight, but not much more. The top one is what I have holding it right now. So when I go to move it, all I have to do is crack the top loose, snug it back down after the pump moves a little bit, check my timing and stuff again. Once I get it where I want it, then I can go down and tighten these two up, because these are kind of a pain to get to. It's possible, obviously, but it's not something you want to keep doing over and over if you don't have to. So that's why I say just use the top one to hold the pump in place for the moment. Once you get the timing set and you're done fiddling with it, then you can do the work it takes to get down in there and snug the bottom two up. Okay, so I got the pump rotated slightly. I just cracked that top nut loose right there that we just looked at. The pump rotated just slightly toward the driver's side on its own. It moved maybe a little more than I wanted it to move, or maybe a little more than I would have moved it if I had to put force into getting it to move. I think we may be a little farther than what we should be, but we're going to start it up again, go back through the process again, and see what it comes up with this time. Do another hot start here while we're at it, see how she starts. Not bad at all. We'll take it. We'll take it. All right, so we want to go back through the procedure again. Go back, make sure we're still good temperature-wise, that it hasn't cooled down at, below 180 while we've been out under the hood. We'll go back to our trouble codes again, read DTCs, make sure we don't have any code stored. We do not. So now we can go back into the TDC time set and learn again, and you just do the procedures again. So timing is a little bit higher now than it was earlier. I think we were at 3.6 earlier. Now we're pretty close to 5. We'll see what that does for us on the offset learn. Okay, so I moved it in the right direction, and I was wrong about how far it moved. It didn't move quite far enough for what we needed, but we definitely moved it in the right direction. As I said, the pump moved just enough to notice that it moved if you were watching it. I think if you were looking the other direction as you cracked the nut loose, and then you looked at the pump after it was done moving, you probably wouldn't even have noticed that the pump actually moved. So again, that just goes to the point, it doesn't take a lot of movement at the pump to make a pretty decent difference down here. So we'll shut it off, move the pump a little bit more, and do all this again. All right, I moved the pump a little bit again, probably about the same amount I moved it the first time. Temperature wise, we're still good to go. Back down here, check for trouble codes. No trouble codes, we're good to go there. Back into the time set and learn. Now you can see we're just a little bit higher now on actual timing. Let's see what the learn comes up with. Look at that, right where we wanted it. Not really where we wanted it, but kind of we hit the sweet spot for what's supposed to be maximum horsepower. Alright, negative 202 is a little bit bad. This program will read from negative 2.02 to positive 2.02. That's kind of the limits each direction of what it will actually read. If you get it outside of that limits, it will set a trouble code for the TDC offset being outside of the limits. So I'm going to have to move it back toward the passenger side, it looks like, just slightly. We moved the pump a little bit back toward the passenger side. I started the process to time it. I got to the codes, and when I read codes, see, I've got a code 88 there for the TDC offset error, which means it was outside of that negative 2.02 to positive 2.02 window that it has to be in. So that's why you have to check codes each time. You may have set that without realizing it. All right, back in here again. We'll run both of these again, see what we come up with. It's just something you kind of have to play with, going back and forth. It's for gas engine guys, if you're just familiar with gas engines, the older style stuff that had a distributor still, it's kind of like setting the ignition timing. You have to set it to a certain area, a certain spec, where it'll run best. Outside of that window, you know, depending on how far outside that window you are, it may be noisy, it may not run very well, it may not have very good power, stuff like that. So that's what we're doing here. It's just kind of a hit and miss thing to get it, you know, where it needs to be. So that is within GM spec there, negative 0.7. I believe their spec is something like, don't quote me, but I believe it's something like negative 0.25 to negative 0.8, somewhere in there. So I believe we're right in the window of what the GM spec is, or real close to it. I may be wrong about that. I haven't looked it up, but I know most guys in the 6.5 world, most guys that have owned them, fooled around with this kind of stuff the most, they all recommend somewhere negative 1.5 to negative 1.94, like I was saying earlier. I think we're going to leave it right here for a minute. I'm anxious to drive the truck. So I think we're going to leave it set right here where it's at for a minute. Seems to be running really smooth right now. Seems to be running really smooth right now. There's no sign of a lope in it like it had with the other injection pump. There's no sign of a miss or that periodic kind of drop in RPM we would have before. Sounds super smooth right now. So I think we're gonna go for a drive and see how it drives. All right, so we're out on the test drive. Truck's running really well. Much better than the last time. No flutter this time at higher RPMs. Feels like it's doing exactly what we'd want it to do. Full throttle there. I'm going up a hill in high gear, so it's not really taking off, but you can see all the data's doing what we want it to. We've got her fixed this time. All right, we're back to the shop again. Truck's running great. You can see where our data's at there. Down here in the lower left corner, that 5 millimeters of fuel at idle. Fantastic. You remember before with the other pump, it was up, I think, in the 20s, something like that. Right where it's supposed to be now. Get the wheel straightened back up here. Still no check engine light. Doing good on hot oil pressure there. You can hear the truck sounds a lot better. I think I mentioned in the part 1 video, it just had a weird idle to it, unlike any other 6.5 I'd heard. This one sounds very typical for a 6.5, exactly what it's supposed to sound like. Look at that. I left the light there. That's a rookie move. So I got everything checked over, no leaks. I went ahead and tightened the last 2 bolts on the injection pump that I was talking about earlier. The more difficult ones to get to. Now that we've got it set where we want and we're done fooling with it, I tightened all 3 bolts down good. I'm really happy with the way this turned out. I know we had a problem with the first Reman injection pump we bought from Pensacola, but they made it right without any argument or without any hassle. And this one's good to go. You know, you're going to have issues every now and then, especially when you're working with mechanical stuff. Sometimes, you know, things slip through the cracks or whatever the case may be as to why that other pump had its issues. But I'm tickled with the customer service I got out of them. I'm tickled with the part, and I'm really happy with the way the truck runs. We're going to do one more hot start here. It's been sitting for probably 15 minutes since we got back. Nice and smooth, quick to start. just like we want it. So like I was saying, I'm really happy with the way this injection pump project turned out. Truck runs great, drives great, starts great. No complaints. I appreciate you sticking with me and watching. Leave me some comments as to what you thought about the videos, things you see we need to do. I appreciate you watching. Take care and have a good day.